This is the first video in the new Crochet Along for Meshberry Pullover. If you can crochet a granny square, you can totally make this beautiful top. One of my favorite ways to teach someone to crochet is with the granny square. The stitches are worked in holes, not in other stitches, and after a few rounds the pattern becomes very easy to memorize. The pullover is seamless, worked from the top all the way down, and ends with a really pretty band of plain double crochet at the lower hem. You can modify it to have sleeves. You can modify it to make it a top, a tunic, or a dress. You could do all sorts of things to give it a custom fit. We're going to be using Be So Fine yarn, which is my 100% bamboo fingering weight yarn. This is hand-dyed colorway Blue Danube, and I'm going to be using an H crochet hook, which is 5mm. We're going to start with a gauge swatch because this is a garment, not a shawl, so we need to do a gauge swatch and make sure that we're making it the right size. You want to follow the flat stitch pattern for the gauge swatch so that we make a flat fabric. The garment is worked in the round, so we want to make sure that we know our stitches are the right size after blocking to make sure that our sweater is going to fit properly. So we're going to start with a chain 18. And we're going to double crochet in the 4th chain from our hook. Yarn over, insert your hook in the chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Chain 1, we're going to skip the next chain and we're going to double crochet in the chain after that. Yarn over, insert your hook in the chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. We're going to work a double crochet in each of the next 2 chains. And then we're going to chain 1, skip the next chain, and then work a double crochet in the chain after that. And 1 double crochet in each of the next 2 chains. Chain 1, skip 1 chain, 1 double crochet in each of the next 3 chains. Chain 1 and 2 double crochets in the last chain. And I'll set it down so you can see what that looks like. Actually, sorry, my mistake. It's just 1 double crochet in the last chain. There we go. That's what it's supposed to look like. Okay, so now the second row starts with a chain 3, which counts as a double crochet. We're going to turn our work and double crochet in the top of that first stitch. So yarn over your hook, insert your hook in the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. We're going to chain 1. We're going to skip the next 3 stitches and we're going to work 3 double crochets in the next chain 1 space. So 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches, work 3 double crochets in the next chain 1 space. I think as a beginner it's so much easier to find where you're working when you're working into these holes of the chain 1 spaces rather than trying to figure out the tops of the stitches. That can come later when you're learning something new. Okay, so we're going to chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches and work 3 double crochets in the next chain 1 space. And double crochet in the last stitch. Okay, row 2 is complete. That's what it looks like. Okay, you're going to repeat row 2, which is chain 3, turn your work, double crochet in the top of the first stitch, chain 1, skip the stitches and work 3 double crochets in the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the stitches and work 3 doubles in the next chain 1 space, chain 1, 3 doubles in the next chain 1 space, and double crochet in the top of the first stitch at the beginning of the row. Okay, so now we have 3 rows complete. It looks like that. So we're going to repeat row 2 again, chain 3, turn our work, double crochet in the same stitch, chain 1, skip the stitches and work 3 doubles in the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the stitches and 3 doubles in the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the stitches, work 3 doubles in the next chain 1 space, and double crochet in the first stitch at the beginning of the row. At the beginning of the previous row or the end of this row, however you want to look at it. Okay. And there's our progress now. We're going to do this again. You just want to keep going until you think you have a square, and I think I'm going to have pretty close to a square at the end of this row, and then I'll show you how we block it and measure our swatch to make sure that we're achieving gauge, so that when we make a sweater based on any of the sizes of the pattern, we'll make a sweater that fits. Okay, the next step is going to be to block our swatch. And when I say block, it's kind of a vague term. What I really ultimately want you to do is get your yarn wet and see how your gauge reacts to water. We're not making something that sits on a shelf, right? We're making garments. And what do we do with garments? We wear them, we get them dirty ultimately, and need to wash them. And anytime you need to wash a yarn, the way it reacts to water is going to affect the gauge. So let's just find out right from the get-go what that is, so that when we wash our garments, we don't change the size of our garments. So what we're going to do is fasten off this square. And if you don't want to fasten it off, you can always just make your loop really, really long and put your ball through it, because I know some people don't like to waste the yarn on a gauge swatch. So here's one alternative, so that you don't unravel your stitches, but you can unravel them after we measure it. So at this point, you can either get out a steamer, use the steamer setting on your iron, or you can put this in water and let it soak for a minute, press the water out, and then we're going to stretch it out with pins and a blocking board and let it dry and measure it at that point. So let's go get some water, and I'll show you what we do after that. Okay, so we pinned out our swatch and gave it a quick steam and let it dry. And because what you want to know is how it not only reacts to water, but then how it dries afterwards also. So I'll take my pins out, and just so you know, when I'm pinning, I like to start in the corners and then go to the midpoints as I'm going. So for example, when I started pinning, I started in the corners like that, and then went to the opposite corners like that, and then went to the midpoints. And that's the way you can keep your shape really even. Okay, so we're going to take our pins out now and give this a quick measure. I'm not so concerned about the row gauge because we're doing a top down and we can adjust the size as we need, but I am worried about the stitch gauge because I want to make sure that we're about 4 inches. And we are. We've got 4 inches for our 18 stitch swatch, which is exactly what I wanted. If it was too big, you'd want to go down a hook size, and if it was too small, you'd want to go up a hook size, and then repeat this process until you are close to the gauge that's recommended in the pattern. So I miscounted the rows on the swatch. I was supposed to do 6 rows to equal 4 inches. So because I only did 5 and we're just shy of 4 inches, it makes me pretty confident that we're pretty on point for the row gauge as well. Because if I did one more row, I would actually achieve my 4 inches. So now we're ready to get started on the sweater. In the next video, I'll show you how we do our foundation setup row to start the sweater with this beautiful seamless foundation.